Hi, and welcome to Data Demystified, the podcast where we look for the truth behind the buzzwords to find value in MarTech, AI, and data for marketing. My name is Kevin van Kalkeren, and in this episode, we'll dive into what might be the biggest challenge in marketing. So, return on investment is one of those questions you can expect at every new project, every new product. And the statistics for AI are not so hopeful. So, on a large scale, AI has only increased the global gross domestic product, national incomes basically, by less than 1% in the last 10 years. 9 out of 10 data science projects don't make it into production even, and about 70% of companies in a 2019 survey said it was hard for them to find the ROI in their AI projects. So overall, bottom line, not a very great contribution, one might say. And we'll talk about how do you measure that ROI effectively, maybe making this a better option for us. Now, first, why is this so complicated to measure? And it has to do, I think, with the value chain itself. The value chain itself is complicated. For a marketing campaign, the ROI can be calculated quite easily by offsetting the costs against the increased margins. Quite easily again, but still, it's a direct kind of intervention and a direct cause and an effect you might be measuring. How do we do this for data and AI? How can we say that better marketing was achieved because we now have better data or better AI? Can we say a good A/B test also justifies our data scientists? Does better marketing attribution pay for itself? Do they have their own value proposition maybe? And I think the answer is yes. We should think about it from that perspective. And we can learn from the best chief data officers in the past to see how they go about this. So we'll talk about that later, but first, in every episode, we'll also take a look at a common belief or a buzzword and see what holds up and what doesn't. And today, like other episodes, we have a question from a listener.
So you talked about a lack of data before. So what do you think of cookieless?
Yes, cookieless. So although not heard as often since Google Chrome announced they are not removing third-party cookies overall, however, cookies have a way broader use case than just analytics. They are primarily used to store information about your previous visits, about your preferences and other information on your device, not just analytics. So I think it can be a confusing term to use cookieless since cookies are not going anywhere. I'd rather focus on a first data approach, use that kind of terminology rather than use the term cookieless. So we've established value from data and AI might not be as great, but that might also be due to the fact that we haven't really thought about how do we measure their value propositions overall. We cannot use them in the same way we can measure ROI on a marketing campaign. And if you want to learn from the best, I think a good source for that is an Harvard Business Review article from 2023, where they listed the best chief data officers and how they measured their added value. And basically that came down to 4 levels of value added. The first level, which is I think the most apparent, is a level of tech and data that handles concrete business problems. So like a smart calculation tool on your website that helps your customers in their buying process. That ROI can typically be measured by the uplift in conversion. People might come to a conversion, to a purchase, a sign up easier than before. So that type of technology does kind of pay for itself. That is closer, I think, to how normally you would calculate the ROI for a marketing campaign as well. On a level deeper, you've got internal data solutions. Think of reporting, dashboards, tools that you can use to make your own life a bit easier to support those business cases. That might unlock new potential, but it can also be a huge time saver. For instance, not having to create your own reports every week from different sources. So typically that is a cost saving over time, which can be offset against the development of those solutions. How much time does it take to build this report once versus how much time does it take to do this from scratch every week? That's cost saving as an ROI. The third level would be data quality and governance. Now, those are not the most sexy terms, and they're also harder to pinpoint. Without them, without good governance, the risks might be high. You might make wrong choices on the data. You might have data breaches, which could result in reputation loss or maybe having to pay damages. But if you do it well, this adds nothing directly. However, the company can assign value to it in more of an administrative way. And in some cases, it might just be a legal must anyhow. So the value added there might be indirect, but a necessity. The fourth and final level is training and culture. So before you get to use those internal data tools, We might ask ourselves how equipped are our people to make use of those tools? How much trust do they have in our data? How satisfied are they with their setup? How satisfied are they with those internal tools like reports and dashboards? And we can probably measure that not so much in monetary value as well as in customer satisfaction or maybe completeness rates of those trainings you set up. Now, not all of those might be as relevant for your organization, but it's a good starting point, I think, to pinpoint in which categories your new initiative falls if you pitch it, and then see from there what type of ROI approach you might use. Now, other things to take into account when you talk ROI is the age of data. How much time do I have to store data versus how much is it worth still? It's not very easy to bookkeep that, but keep in mind storing data might cost you money, so why not take into account what the age of that is? Another issue with AI and data solutions is that something that works today might not work tomorrow. So if you build a model that can predict something very well now, we still have to make sure that we monitor the effect over time and maybe even build into that some kind of functionality to retrain, recalibrate the model on new data to make sure it has some kind of longevity. So that's what we call model drift in data science terms, where the model suddenly starts prediction errors way more than before. And to combat that, to counter that, you have to make some kind of changes to the model. You have to take that into account when you build a business case and calculate the ROI for a data or AI product. And now another bit more abstract example maybe, but I think quite important if we're talking the applications of models of insights, is the cost of being wrong is sometimes not taken into account. So imagine you're building a churn model. We want to predict which customers are going to go away, for instance, at the end of the year or when the subscription end date comes into sight. And we might have a model that's very good at that. We might have a model that's very good at predicting these customers are probably going to go away. We call those true positives, right? People where we thought they were going to go away and they actually did as well. If that's very high, that might be very useful for your model and very useful for your marketing or for customer success or whatever type of agent you have to combat that type of retention. A question you also have to ask yourself is, what is the false positive rate? So out of the 100 of people that I'm going to call this week, how many of those are actually going to go away? And how many of those were never going to go away anyhow, but now that I've called them, they must start thinking about going away. The false positives, people we thought were going to go away, but probably wouldn't have, do go away now. That's a cost point that is not reflected just in the added benefit of being right at prediction, but also the cost of being wrong. If we are wrong about those predictions, what is the negative side effect of that? And then you also have to ask yourself, what is the value of those customers? If we call the wrong ones, if we call our most valuable customers thinking they're going to go away and they weren't, but suddenly now they are, that might be very bad. So you have to probably factor into account there as well, customer lifetime value. And if we're talking churn, calling someone manually might be a very cost-intense procedure. If you send them an email, maybe less so. So that entire business case can be built probably on the back of a napkin, but we still have to think in the entire value chain, which, like I said in the beginning, might be very complex, and not just in our model does X, we are right 80% of the time, therefore we're going to make money from this. That entire process, from false positives to the customer lifetime value and the cost it might bring about to intervene in those churning examples, that's the entire value chain that we have to take into account while building this model and putting it into production. Looking to sound smart at your next social gathering? Here's a quick insight on this topic you could just casually throw out there at the drinks table at your next conference. Did you know AI only increased global GDP about 1% over the last 10 years? It makes you wonder if the people making money with it are mostly AI vendors themselves. All right, so we've talked about how calculating the ROI for data, tech, AI propositions are different than when we do this for marketing campaigns. So what's our take-home message? Well, first and foremost, there is no one way to calculate ROI. But it does require a different approach than when you calculate ROI for a campaign, for instance. And I'd recommend having those discussions beforehand. When you start a new project, where do we fit in? What type of value are we adding? Also, take note that data science projects, for instance, will inevitably fail sometimes. Not all models can be trained well enough. Not every behavior can be predictable enough to be put into production. All those factors make it so that that percentage of data science projects in AI cases should not make it into production because they don't add value. Embracing that starts off a cultural level, believing that innovation comes with failure. Thank you for listening to Data Demystified. If you'd like to know more about these topics, AI for marketing, data, MarTech, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to add value to our podcast, be sure to rate it, like it, wherever you find your podcast. I'll be sure to see you next time.